Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth author interaction of the 2025 NLF Reading Challenge. My name is Zainab, and I hope you are as excited to be here as I am. Before we begin the interaction, let me give you a brief introduction about the NLF Reading Challenge, followed by a few housekeeping rules for today's session. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 3-month-long reading event from May to August 2025 for students between grades 4 to 6. It runs on the competitive as well as the non-competitive tracks. For the challenge, students read their way through a curated set of 30 books. They discuss their reading with their friends and their guide, log their thoughts, and get to interact with the authors of some of these books online. For today's event, please use the Q&A box to type out your questions or your responses to what's being discussed during the session. If you're from a school, please mention the name of your school along with your question. Today, we are privileged to have with us the best-selling author, Martin Stewart. Martin Stewart has been writing for a long time, having made his first book at the age of 8 using post-it notes. His multi-award listed young adult debut, River Keep, was released in 2016. Since then, he's written young adult horror, middle grade adventure, adult crime, and the Bridget Vanderpuff series. Before he was a writer, Martin worked as, in no particular order, an English teacher, university lecturer, recruitment consultant, barman, bouncer, golf caddy, recycling technician, and wine advisor. Now he spends his days reading, writing, dreaming up new stories, and visiting schools to talk about the creative process. A native of Glasgow, he now lives on the west coast of Scotland with his wife, 2 children, and a very big dog. He enjoys cooking with eggs, running on the beach, rewatching his favorite films, and buying books to feed his to-be-read pile. His latest book for children is Sandy Finn, Operation Splash Landing. Martin joins us today to speak about his book, Bridget Vanderpuff and the Baked Escape, which is on the reading list of the challenge. Welcome, Martin. We're very happy to have you with us today.
Hello, hi, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Hi, Martin. Would you like to begin the session with a short reading from the book?
Yes, I would. So hopefully everybody can understand me with my Scottish accent. If not, you can put a question in and I'll clarify what it is I'm saying. So this is from Bridget Vanderpuff and the Baked Escape. This is the very first chapter. This is the opening chapter, and we're about halfway through. And Bridget Vanderpuff lives in the orphanage for errant childs here with her best friend Tom, and Tom has been locked in a bear trap in Miss Ackrod's office. Miss Ackred is the mistress of the orphanage, and Bridget has broken in to try and rescue Tom. And when we meet her here, she's holding up one of her inventions, the listening glass, listening to see if Miss Ackred's coming. Bridget grabbed the listening glass. Footsteps, unmistakably Miss Ackred's, thundered in her ears. "She's coming!" "Oh no," whispered Tom. "Run, Bridget, go! There's no sense in you getting caught when it was me who..." But Bridget was already kneeling beside the bear trap, eyes tightly shut. "Bridget, shh!" The listening glass was hopping on the floor. "Go! You needn't..." "Shh!" hissed Bridget. Trying to ignore the rumble of approaching boots, she followed the clever little pattern of the padlock's pins, working the lockpick with twists and tickles and taps until, with a satisfying solid thunk, the pins sang their secret song and the padlock fell apart. "You did it!" cried Tom, rubbing his leg as Miss Ackrod's footsteps drew nearer. "But now what do we do? We're trapped!" Bridget kicked the window, which swung open with a scrape of powdery snow. A sharp wind cut the children's cheeks. "Out the window," said Tom. "But I made this from 1,000 elastic bands," said Bridget, unwinding a long rope from around her waist, "for exactly this situation. You made this so we could jump out Miss Ackrod's window after you'd freed me from a bear trap I get put in for singing 'Look Out, Mr. Chipmunk' while standing on a 3-legged table with one foot in a bowl of cold porridge and the other in a piece of burnt toast." "Well, maybe not exactly this situation," said Bridget, tying one end of the rope to Miss Ackrod's enormous desk and the other around Tom's middle. Tom peered uncertainly into the gardens. The distant trees looked like pieces of frosted broccoli, and the great maze, a wintry labyrinth of thickets and leaves, sprawled towards the horizon. Will it take my weight? He said. Definitely, said Bridget. Then, because she never lied, added, probably. Probably, screamed Tom, vanishing out the window. The door burst open. Miss Acrid, her battleship bosom trembling with rage, her battle-axe nose flaring and high, burst into the room. Baxter! She screamed, flexing her grubby fists. This time you've gone too far. Bridget picked up the mistress's disgusting breakfast sandwich. It was heavy and wet and smelled like rotting seaweed. Miss Acrid froze. Now, Baxter, she said carefully, don't do anything silly. Silly like what? Said Bridget. Silly like eat your horrible breakfast. Miss Acrid took a clump forward. You don't want to do something you'll regret, she said. She took another clump, her giant boot throwing up a cloud of dust. Is that so? Said Bridget. Miss Acrid's eyes widened. Be sensible, she snarled, and put down my breakfast. Bridget stared into the mistress's black eyes. You know, Miss Acrid, she said, I read somewhere that you only regret the things you don't do. And she bit so far into the disgusting sandwich the crusts touched her ears. Miss Acrid went purple, mouth flapping as she filled her lungs with one of her legendary screams. Bridget hopped onto the enormous desk and jumped out the window.
Thank you for that lovely animated reading, Martin. It gives us a great sense of the mischief and mayhem that is to come in the book. So let's dive right into it. As is evident from the title, baking is at the heart of Bridget Vanderpuff and the Baked Escape. From Bridget's very first encounter with the flaky, buttery warmth of a croissant to all the fabulous goodies in Vanderpuff's bake shop, your writing treats us readers to a sensory feast. There is half a page devoted to just listing the astonishing variety of jams that Mr. Vanderpuff stores in his cabinets. A strong sense of wonder and delight fills every scene involving a baked dish, and I love how unapologetic the book is about it all. It's such a marked contrast from how dessert is often framed by adults as a guilty pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question is, what led you to write this gorgeous sugar rush of a book, which celebrates the joys of baking and sharing? Is baking something you or your loved ones enjoy in real life?
You know, it's such a good question. I mean, I think I do bake with my children, and that is something that we do together. I did prior to that, I wasn't a big baker, and I didn't grow up in a household of bakers. My mother did bake occasionally, not especially well. It's not like a sort of family tradition or anything, but it was something we did together. And I think that was something that I thought would be a shared experience. I think of it almost, if you know that, do you know in Inside Out, the Pixar movie, the core memories? I think it was one of mine. Sharing that with my mother, and you get a chance to stir the bowl and all that kind of thing. And it's something that you do to show someone that you love them. And it's something that you do when you are together or in celebration. And I think that was something that I was looking to tell a story about family, about found family in Bridget's case, because she escapes Miss Acrid's orphanage for errant childs and finds a new family. And the means by which the love she finds is expressed is through cake or a cupboard full of jam, as you say. And I think partly this also came from the birth of my first child. So I have two children. In fact, this book is dedicated to my first child. This is for Tessie. And the second book is dedicated to Milo, who's my son, and they are 8 and 5. And when my first child was born, my wife and I, because you are up through the night a lot, feeding this baby, and she was very early, she was very small, she was 4 pounds 15. And so we had to feed her with bottles, and so you're awake in the middle of the night a lot. And what we did together was watch the Great British Bake Off, which I had never seen before. My wife had seen it, but I hadn't seen it. And at that point, it was on Netflix. So we watched all of it. It was maybe 7 or 8 seasons at that point. And it was just this very early experience of having my own family, my own children. and this gentle show about baking, and that made me think about my mother and the birthday cakes that she made me and all these things. And I think it just sort of over a couple of years turned into this story. Excuse my dog coming in to say hello. Here he is. There we are. And I think it just became, as I say, a story. I want to tell a story about love and family. And I thought baking was the best way to do that. And it was all these experiences that led me to making that decision, I think.
Thank you for that warm response, Martin. Now, this brings us to a student question from Naisha Anandji, Arav Saxena, and Dia Jain from Utpal Shangvi Global School, Mumbai, who ask, how did you come up with the fun and unique names for the bakery items in the book? And if you were to visit Vanderpuff's bakery yourself, which pastry would you pick and why?
Thank you very much for that question. I've never been asked that before, which is really fun to be asked something like that. The names for the cakes were something that I took a lot of pleasure in, because writing can sometimes be quite difficult. And there are days where, I'm just in my house at the moment, and that's where I spend all my time, is just trying to write. And some days it's quite hard work, and, it's a little bit lonely. And other days you get to come up with funny names for cakes, and that's just really fun and enjoyable. And I was looking wherever I could for jokes, and alliteration was also really important. And I would allow myself to be led by what the cake, it might be a cherry cake or it might be a banana cake, and trying to sort of see where there might be a joke that could be made there, because the cakes always had to sound fun or silly or as though they might explode or something really energetic about that. And so I would just play around with the words and see if I could get something that really felt fun to me and that I felt I could really connect with and that I thought the readers might enjoy. If I was going to visit the bakery, I would have a Fabanana swirl, because I'm a big banana fan, and that sort of banoffee banana caramel cream thing, I think that's the one that I would enjoy the most. And it's when I think of the bakes, that's what I think of. Although I'm a big pastry fan, and that's why the croissant is very important in the book, and pastry is very important. But I think I would go for a Fabanana swirl.
I'm sure Naisha, Arav, and Dia appreciate that answer, Martin. Let's now move on to our beloved protagonist. The book opens with Bridget and her friend Tom in Miss Ackred's orphanage for errant childs, as we saw in your reading. And we see Bridget in all her glory, resourceful, quick-witted, and loyal. The opening chapters got us thinking about how so many iconic characters in children's literature are orphans, be it Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, Sophie from the BFG, or Harry Potter. What do you think it is that makes the orphan story such an integral part of children's literature? When writing the story, were you conscious of this aspect?
Yes, I really was. I think when you write children's, when you write anything, as you said in your introduction, I've written crime fiction for adults as well, and there's a very strong tradition there as well. And with children's fiction, you're standing on the shoulders of, Roald Dahl and J.K. Rowling and lots of people who've written these timeless stories. And as you say, there are lots of orphans in children's fiction. And I think I was deliberately playing with a kind of classic story structure. And that's, Miss Ackred, who runs the orphanage, is so mean and horrible. And very, I'm really playing around with Miss Trunchbull there from Matilda, which was, I think, my favourite book when I was a child. Miss Trunchbull kind of looms large, I think, over all other baddies. And so I really wanted somebody who would sort of walk in those footsteps a little bit. And that meant, well, where was it going to be? And rather than it being a school, I wanted to play with that tradition, because we all recognize, I think, an orphan story, and then to use that and also do something slightly different with it. I think, from a practical storytelling point of view, if you can get rid of the parents it becomes easy to tell a different kind of story. Whereas if Bridget's parents were there, she would be having to explain all the time where she was going, or they would be constantly trying to stop her climbing on the roof and things like that. Whereas she's free in a way that she might not otherwise be. And obviously, I mean, what that means is Bridget can do anything. When we meet her at the start of the story, you know, she's in there saving Tom from a bear trap, and then she ties him, pushes him out the window, and jumps out the window herself. I mean, she's completely fearless, and she can do anything she wants. What she needs is love, and she finds it with Mr. Vanderpuff, and that becomes part of her story, that she is looking for a family. And I think that's what you get with Orphans. And like I was saying, Harry Potter, you know, he eventually finds a new kind of family, and we love that as readers, I think, and that's what I was wanting to do here.
Thanks for that super insightful response, Martin. We now have a student question from Arav Yadav, a grade 6 student from Mindtree School, Ambala, who asks, when Tom tells Bridget that one day she'll find one thing she's not good at, was that a bit of foreshadowing, considering that she gets adopted by the best baker in Belle on the Sea, while she turns out to be terrible at baking? Was the foreshadowing intentional, or did it occur naturally while writing?
That's an excellent question. It absolutely is a bit of foreshadowing, which is a great thing to have spotted. So well done with that. There's a combination, those kind of things. Sometimes it happens naturally. But we were chatting before we started today, and I was telling you how long it had taken me to write the book. And this book took me longer than anything else I have ever written. This took me 5 years to write. And what I had was Bridget, who was so brave and so believed in the right thing and loved her friend and wanted love and wanted to find a family. And she had all these inventions. The shape of the story changed quite a lot. I couldn't quite find how to do it. The bakes changed before they were. It was like there were monsters in the book at first, and then I changed it and got rid of them and did something else. And so things like that, little bit of foreshadowing. Once I had the story in place, this is the bit that I like the most, is then you go back and you plant these little seeds for the reader. And I find that the most fun. So I think that one came later. And that was when Tom said that, because we know as readers, and you've picked up on it so well, is that when he says this, you go, and you feel, you know, where the story's going, and that's always fun. So thank you for that. It was a great question.
Continuing on the theme of writing, we have a question about a standout feature in the book, the delightful footnotes. We mostly see footnotes in academic writing, so it was quite a surprise to see a middle grade adventure novel packed with them. You've used the footnotes to supply more details and context, to give readers additional information on Bridget's inventions, or to shed more light on background characters such as the orphanage's cook, Mrs. Pobbit. Why did you decide to use footnotes extensively in the story? Were the footnotes part of your story right from the first draft, or did you add them later during the editing process?
I'm really glad you asked this. I love the footnotes. I had always wanted to write a book with footnotes because I read so much Terry Pratchett when I was younger. And I still do. I mean, I still love the Terry Pratchett books, but they were a massive part. Probably the biggest part of my reading life has been reading the Terry Pratchett Discworld books when I was a teenager into my 20s. And there are footnotes throughout those. And as a reader, I always enjoyed them so much. His are slightly different because he has a different kind of storytelling voice. So sometimes there are little jokes about the story. And I always felt that you were being sort of let into a little bit of secret information. And I found that really fun. But I always wanted to do them kind of as a tribute to him and to sort of play around with something that I had enjoyed so much as a reader. And so, no, they were always in it from the very start. They were a chance to make extra jokes. They are somewhere that you can put those little details without having to slow the story down. And they're not, I quite like, you don't necessarily need to read them. I think that was how I felt about them. You should be able to read the story without them. but if you do read them, they're like little Easter egg bonuses. And that was what I hoped. I hoped people would really enjoy them because I had enjoyed them so much as a reader. But they were always in there from the start. Yeah, that was something that was important to me.
Thank you for that insight into your writing process, Martin. I'd like to bring up a moment from the book that stays with me, which is when Bridget makes a mess of beating eggs and flees to the rooftop in despair. She thinks that Mr. Vanderpuff might send her back to the orphanage if she can't bake properly. Mr. Vanderpuff, however, has no such intention. This is what he tells Bridget. My dear, even if you cover me in eggs, even if you decide you never want to bake again, even if you burn my bakery to the ground, I will never want you to go back to that place. In saying so, Mr. Vanderpuff asserts that his love for Bridget isn't conditional. Why was it important for you to convey that a parent's love for their child is not, or should not be, tied to any fixed, conventional notion of success?
It's just such a good question. And this is really, really central to what I wanted to do with the book and to Bridget's relationship with Mr. Vanderpuff. Is that I'd said before, what she has everything, really. She's so capable. But what she needs is love. And she finds it with Mr. Vanderpuff. And it's not something that is in question. It's not that the shape of the story could have been that she has to bake a perfect cake and then she can stay. You know, and that you could do it that way. I didn't want to do anything like that. It was, you know, he loves her and he wants to look after her. And so that telling the story of having a found family and of Bridget learning what that means because she's never had it before is for her to realize this, that it's not, she doesn't have to perform to be loved or to deserve love. And that love, that unconditional parents' love, is really, really central to the story. So that was how I chose to have that explicitly explained, because Bridget feels insecure and he brings her this security. And the idea of it being connected to failure was something that I wanted to talk about, because I think that resilience is so important. And I think that failing is very important. Failure teaches you much more than success. And when I was at school, for example, I was much better at English and history than I was at maths and science, because that's the way my mind works. And it's useful to know that. I think what I wanted to convey with this is that it's okay to fail, and that you will, by failing, you can try again, and you can build resilience, and you can try again, and you can pursue success. And that actually it's okay that Bridget is not a good baker. She's good at so many other things. We don't have to, have this uniform success in everything we ever try. Failure is okay. We still deserve love. We can learn about ourselves, and we can be, and obviously what Bridget discovers is that actually, although she's a terrible baker, she is very, very successful in other ways as a result,
Yeah. That brings us to a question from the live audience, which came in through the chat box. Viraj Thakur from the Sriram School, Aravali, Gurgaon, asks, have you had any cooking disasters yourself? And were they in any way similar to the ones in the book?
That's yeah. That's very funny you ask that. Yesterday, I tried a recipe that I found on Instagram, which is one of these things where somebody has made a very convincing video where you just see the ingredients arrive in a bowl, and it takes 10 seconds, and you mash it up. There's no flour, bananas in the oven, and then you have these brownies, which are super healthy, yada, yada, yada. And so I tried that yesterday, and I didn't have exactly the ingredients I needed. I needed 4 bananas, but I only had 2. So I tried to cut down the number of eggs and it is in the bin as we speak. My attempt at brownies is in the bin. So yes, I am not a natural baker at all. And I have had many, many kitchen disasters. And one of them was last night when I tried to make these viral Instagram healthy brownies, and they went terribly wrong. Not as badly wrong as Bridget's, but we did not eat them. Yeah, thank you for that.
On an equally lighter note, we have a student question from Aryana Sharma, Myra Pandya, and Advika Chugani of Jamnabai Narsi School, Mumbai, who ask, if Bridget could create a signature dessert, what would it be? Would it reflect her personality or solve a problem in the story?
I really, I really love that. I think that's, I can only say that I think what you've asked in the question is so well phrased because actually, I think Bridget's personality is about solving problems in the story. So they're kind of the same thing. I'm not trying to cheat with my answer. That is Bridget's personality. That's who she is. So I think she would make a cake that looked like an ordinary cake, but that had detective powers. So I think it would maybe have icing that you could use as invisible ink. I think it would maybe have like a vanilla pod or maybe like a chocolate decoration that you could use as a lockpick. And it would be a sort of secret detective's cake that you could sit in the window of the bake shop and everyone would think it was a normal cake, but actually it was really, that's what Bridget's personality is. It's about solving crimes and solving problems in the story. So I think that's what she would make. I love that question. I think that's great. Thank you for that.
And what a fantastic answer from you as well. Ingenious. This brings us to a student question from Shanaya Man, a grade 5 student from the Sri Ram School, Vasant Vihar, New Delhi. She asks, which one of Bridget's inventions is your absolute favorite and why?
Yeah, so Bridget's I mean, I said she's a terrible baker. She's a very good engineer to a point. She's a very good inventor and she has lots of things that she keeps in her hair, in her huge hair. I have actually, Bridget, this is my phone case. As we can see all the things that she keeps in her hair, many of which she's invented herself. So thank you for this. I think my favorite one is the special occasion cake safe, which she invents at the beginning of the second book, which is Bridget Vanderpuff and the Ghost Train. And what that's for is you put your cake in it, you buy a cake in Vanderpuff's, put your cake in it, and then you lock it and you set a timer for it. And that means that you can't eat it right away. And it means that you can then share it with people. Because the temptation when you visit Vanderpuff's is to eat the cakes immediately, which is what I would do. But if you're taking it home to share with your family, or if you have a friend coming to visit later that day, you want to keep the cake for them. So you have this safe and it will, at the time, it will then open and you can share the cakes. But it doesn't quite work. And she ends up using it for something else to solve a problem in the story. But I like that what it showed was because we find out she's invented this right at the beginning of the second book, and that's when we see her living with Mr. Vanderpuff. And Mr. Vanderpuff's most important principle of baking is that baking is best when it's shared. And this is Bridget beginning to understand her new life and what it means to be at Vanderpuff's bake shop and what it's like living with Mr. Vanderpuff and why it's so important to share baking, because obviously it's fun to eat a cake by yourself, because which I do a lot. But it's better to share it. And these special moments where you have family celebrations and you all eat this thing together and your enjoyment is multiplied because you're sharing it. And Bridget invents this thing to make that possible for people who otherwise would be tempted to just eat it immediately.
Thank you, Martin. Unfortunately, we have to move on to the last question of the day. After three Bridget sequels, you most recently came out with Sandy Finn, Operation Splash Landing, which is also set in the same universe as Bridget Vanderpuff. Would you like to share with us what brought you back to this world? Why did you decide to pick a new character and setting to continue exploring the universe?
Yeah, so this I have one here. This is Sandy Finn. I'll show you this. So this came out in the UK in the summer, just at the start of June. And so Sandy, as you say, Sandy lives in the same universe as Bridget. He lives in a village called Port Whistle, which is just up the coast from where Bridget lives. And that was something that was really important to me personally, because I live on the coast. So I'm talking to you just now from the west coast of Scotland, which is still, kind of amazing to me that we're able to do this. But I've moved here from Glasgow, so I grew up in the city and I've moved down to the coast. And all my childhood holidays were taken down here beside the water and on an island called Arran, just off the coast of Scotland. And so such an important part of what made my childhood happy, and what I think of when I think of my childhood, is being beside the sea and climbing around on rocks and looking for creatures in rock pools and things. And I've always wanted to do a story like that. My favorite books are always set by the sea. And so expanding Bridget's world, I really wanted to be able to do that. And not just because Bridget lives beside the sea as well, but to have a story where that's totally central to what happens, because it means that we can have eels and walruses and pirates and have him constantly feeling his, the seawater in his hair and the smells that come with that, and that really sensory world. And it sparked another huge part of my imagination, because I think my imagination always lives beside the water. And I really wanted it to be in Bridget's world, because I love that as a reader. I think when you get little bits of crossover, and there's a character in Sandy Finn who is in the second Bridget book, and so that's his name is Captain Lufty, and so he appears in Sandy Finn. And as a reader, I love that. I just think that's always so fun to create that kind of storytelling universe. So I really wanted to do that. So yes, Sandy's been a huge amount of fun. I'm actually just now today, I'm editing the second Sandy Finn book. So there's 4 Bridget books, and there's going to be 4 Sandy books as well. And I mean, after that, I would love to have like a team up where they become sort of like the Avengers, but with cakes. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today, Martin. We wish you the very best for all your future books. We can't wait to read them.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you so much for the invitation. I've loved talking to you guys, and thank you so much for your questions. They were really fantastic. So bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Martin. Our next interaction is with award-winning author Yorick Goldowik, whose book Movie Showing Nowhere is a part of the reading list for the 2025 NLF Reading Challenge. This will take place on Thursday, July 31st from 5:30 to 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do keep an eye out for our email on the session or follow our social media handles. We look forward to seeing you there. Until we meet next, take care. Happy reading.